Welcome to a new Daily Top AskReddit video. Today's topic.
People of Kentucky, how do you feel about the trade war with Canada in view of the boycott of $9.3 billion of your whiskey and goods? As a Kentuckian, the majority of people around here think the tariffs are some 3D chess move. They won't start to question Trump's strategy until jobs are lost en masse and distilleries close. In chess, a pawn's job is to be sacrificed. They are the pawns. You think that'll be enough to make the question? I feel like at this point, they'd find a way to blame Obama, Biden, liberals and double down on the beliefs. Quote, 100%. It's pathetic that Democrats, well, or just anyone who supports democracy in general, are still assuming the other side will just wake up one day. It's Canada and Mexico's fault. Because they're the ones hurting our economy even though Trump started the trade war. It's working for the pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian propaganda. A lot of the responses are really just here to dunk of Kentuckians, so I just want to provide an actual response. The biggest concern I have as a Kentuckian isn't just that people are not going to buy $9.3 billion in goods from our state, it's that the resulting consequences will be seen for generations. Something a lot of people may not realize is that most of the distilleries in our state are in small towns. They are almost the entire local economy for some of these areas, and for a few of them, the entire county. Once these distilleries start laying off people, it's not like there is somewhere else for them to go work. These families likely will not have the money or resources to find work elsewhere, and with little interest in real estate in those areas, they will be tied down by their own assets. Many of those towns already have issues with cyclical poverty, but this will just make the problem largely unsolvable. To be clear, I understand that Kentucky is a bit of a laughingstock for many people, and as a liberal living here I can attest that many of the perceptions people have are justified. Personally, I am in complete agreement with the boycott. We can only hope that there is a way for our country to course correct, but I can't say I am hopeful of that. Edit, this kinda blew up, and while I would like to reply to everyone, I only have so much time on my lunch break. I am actually a grocery data analyst and this issue is quite complex. I can write for hours about the downstream effects of this boycott, from the distribution companies, warehouse workers, even the brokers who manage these accounts externally. I just wanted to address a few of the major questions people have been asking. 1. I think the split for people blaming Trump for this is about 20 to 80. I think most Kentuckians will blame Canadians for boycotting their products without seeing the nuances of any of this. It is terrible, and I really wish they could understand why Canadians, or other Americans, would stop buying our products, but if there is anything we have learned from this past decade, it is that we live in a post-truth era where no amount of facts will satisfy their anger. 2. I worked on Alison Lundergan Grimes's campaign as well as Amy McGrath's, and unfortunately both lost to a man who has done irreparable damage to America, McConnell. Something to consider is many Republicans also hate Mitch, it's just that they see him as giving Kentucky footing on a national level. Having him as Senate Majority Leader means he can do more good for Kentucky, is a very common sentiment among ours who would vote him out otherwise. It's upsetting, I hate it, but I do believe it is possible to replace his seat with a Dem going forward. 3. I cannot be more clear that I believe the boycott is a good thing. I know it will hurt people in Kentucky, and I feel like that is probably for the best. My concern isn't that the people who voted for Trump this time around will suffer. It's that their kids, the grandkids, the great-grandkids and so on will suffer as the towns die out, crime rates skyrocket, and isolationism festers. Hope this answers some questions people have, and I am happy to respond to any messages later today. Removed. Good thing I moved from Kentucky to Ohio. Really dodged a. Never mind, I feel the bullet still. I cannot justify the deep-seated, generationally learned hatreds that bounce around in the culture of this area. What's sad is, when times become harder and poverty increases, people tend to double down on the hate and authoritarian policies. They'll never admit that it's up to them to improve their condition, it has to be someone else's fault. Even when the tariffs are lifted, the Canadian market is going to be hostile to American goods for a long time. Potentially generational damage caused by the 51st state bullshit. Canadian here, until you purge this circus of an administration, I will not be spending a single discretionary penny on American goods. As an American one, do not blame you one bit. Canada needs to announce that any reciprocal tariffs will last at least 30 days, so none of this shit where Trump rescinds the tariffs the next day, etc. In the case of bourbon, it really doesn't matter. Most individual Canadians will boycott it, even if the tariff war ends. The threat to annex us is a bigger insult than the tariffs. Oh, believe me, tariff or no tariff, we're not interested in spending a dime on American products until you guys do something about the dictator you have running the show. Won't be enough. It may take a lifetime to overcome this. Lifetime Kentucky resident here, also a logistics manager who understands how tariffs work. This is going to screw over our economy big time. Already, Brown-Forman, located in Louisville, company that owns Jack Daniels, Woodford Reserve, etc., laid off 12% of their staff. The bourbon industry was already slowing, and the tariffs have only worsened it. Not only will alcoholic spirits be affected, but logistics will be heavily affected as well. Louisville is where the largest UPS hub is located, called Worldport. Millions and millions of shipments from all around the world are processed here, and the revenue it creates for the city is incomparable. With tariffs, we will soon see a drop in imports, and as imports drop, so will the revenue generated by the international traffic at Worldport. People will absolutely be affected by this decision, and far sooner than we expect. All of that being said, I 100% stand by Canada and its decision to start cutting ties with the US. What Trump and Musk have done is wholly unforgivable and downright shameful. They're an embarrassment to the American people and are blatantly choosing to kneel down to Putin and his circus. If Canada ever decides to resume healthy and fair trade with the US after this betrayal, we will thank them for their kindness and work our hardest to rebuild our trust. Until then, Canada must take care of its own, and that's exactly what they're doing. If Canada ever decides to resume healthy and fair trade with the US, we will. We don't want this fight. That said, buying patterns will be very hard to shift back. When trade does resume, the deficit Trump complains about will be much larger. The longer it goes on, the more we'll entrench with the EU, Commonwealth, and other reliable partners. As a Canadian, I was surprised to find out how many products there are that simply don't have a Canadian-made version, or at least not by an actual Canadian company as opposed to a Canadian branch of a US corporation. We have distribution issues here because of needing to transport goods over an equal or larger-sized area with only a tenth of the population. Because of that, it's not always economically feasible or at least worthwhile to produce a purely Canadian version of things when a US distribution system for the equivalent already exists. But this crisis shows us that we're unprepared to fend entirely for ourselves in those spaces, and I suspect that will start to change over the coming years and decades. More trade with other nations, especially from Europe, less overall trade with the US even after Donnie Darko is gone, and more efforts to produce our own staple goods. I'm sitting next to a Trump supporters from work right now. He says he's not really into that kind of stuff and doesn't really research politics. They aren't actually Donald supporters or political but will have meltdowns defending him. I've got one in my family, he has literal brain damage. I live in a decently nice apartment complex that has frequent get-together events, and after seeing the same couple of people every time, I made a few casual friends, one of which is an older Gen X lady that's nice enough, but quite a bit of a Karen. A couple of weeks ago I admittedly lost my cool and ended up ranting at her when she said she voted for Trump. She just kept laughing at me and saying she's the least political person there is, no response other than to keep laughing when I said she voted for fascism. It was mind-blowing because she acted like it didn't matter at all, but I also haven't heard from either her or the dude that was also there during this argument in 2 weeks. My Trump-voting coworker is complaining that we can't hire anyone to replace the people that quit when they announced the return to office. That tracks. I can't get anyone at work to get into the issues they wouldn't shut up about back in November. I wish them all harm in the future, and they know it. Not by me. Perhaps they endlessly stub their toe on an invisible curb that seems to go everywhere they go. Constant paper cuts, something. But I want them inconvenienced the rest of their lives for being the way they are. People were Googling, did Biden resign, after the elections? I just cannot fathom living life that uninformed. I get that for a lot of people just making ends meet is exhausting, but to just not consume any news when this shit is going to have an impact on your life. I don't expect most people to know, like, nuanced international relations shit. God knows I don't, and we have to rely on experts for that. But to just know nothing, I don't get it. Yeah, I work at a distillery and am currently getting laid off. My job ends at the end of next month. Thing is, this is a really bad time for the tariffs to hit. Trump 1.0 was in the middle of the bourbon boom. The tariffs didn't devastate the industry due to the overall vast demand. Yes, we lost around $500 million in profit because the upward trend in Europe stopped, and so did their importing, but the profit margin was so high everywhere else that it didn't matter. This time around, especially with Canada and the timing, it hurts. Canada imports a lot of bourbon, especially the kind I bottle, Bullet. Roughly approximately 10% of the export market of bourbon from Kentucky goes to Canada. Now if it was still 2016-17, this wouldn't be a problem, but it's 2025 and the bourbon boom is ending. You have an oversaturated market with a customer base that's no longer growing. Plus if you look at the trends of Gen Z, they don't drink, not even close to the generations before them. With the economy generally trending downward too, customers will buy something different. They won't buy the $35 bottle of bourbon when they can get a shitty case of beer for 1/3 the price. The industry could have either shored up production over time and braced for the end of the bourbon boom without Trump. Or if the bourbon boom continued with him. Both happening, the end of the bourbon boom trend and his presidency is why layoffs are going wild in Kentucky. About 1,000 full-time jobs have been lost in the past month that I know of, and there's probably more that I don't know about. So how do I feel about a trade war with one of our closest allies, neighbors, trading partners? It's ridiculous. It's affecting thousands of people across a very large plane of the economy to do this. And for what purpose? Respect? Fairness? It makes me mad that people around me directly voted for this bullshit when we all saw it coming a mile away. It's harmful and hurts good working class people everywhere, and we deserve better. Also to our Canadian friends, many of us don't support this, so we understand your frustration. Sorry this is happening to you. As a Canadian, I wish it didn't have to come to this. The tariffs are one thing, but I think a lot of Canadians will stay away from US products for years to come due to the 51st state comments. Dual citizen here, you're right, the repercussions to this stupidity will last for a long time. For years to come. This is the bit Americans don't understand, just how long their reputation will be damaged. They could elect 10 in a row of the most outstanding presidents in history, and there will still be people alive that remember that they are just one election away from having some idiot in charge that's going to fuck everything up again.